An enemy from Crockett's past returns to destroy his world on today's Miami Vice. Deliver Us from Evil was directed by George Mandaluk and was written by David Black, Michael Duggan, and Robert Palm from a story idea by Dick Wolf. It continues the story started in Season 3's Forgive Us Our Debts, in which Crockett worked hard to free Frank Hackman, the convicted murderer of Crockett's former partner, from death row based on new evidence suggesting his innocence, only to discover that Hackman had bamboozled him. Following an extensive recap of Forgive Us Our Debts, the episode opens with a violent home invasion, in which a group of masked men break into a mansion and kill the homeowners, including a teen daughter. While the invaders never remove their ski masks, it's clear the ringleader is Frank Hackman, Crockett's nemesis from Forgive Us Our Debts, who is once again played by Guy Boyd. It's a homicide case, but Crockett and Tubbs are summoned to the morgue to look at the corpses in case there's a drug angle. Meanwhile, Crockett's pop star wife, Caitlin, played by Sheena Easton in her final Vice appearance, has been trying to get him on the phone for a serious talk. She'll be returning to Miami soon on her sold-out world tour, but she's got big news that she wants to tell him first. Throughout this episode, their phone calls keep getting interrupted by Crockett's job duties, and thus she never gets to have that serious talk with him, but it's clear from the way she cradles her abdomen that she's pregnant. At headquarters, Castillo briefs the Vice detectives on the home invasions. Crockett recognizes some details of the case as part of Hackman's standard MO and receives permission from Castillo to look into it. Notice that Crockett is wearing, for the first time in a couple of seasons, that iconic white suit and aqua shirt combination that used to be his signature look. That's very deliberate. It's a callback to an earlier version of Crockett who was somewhat younger and somewhat more innocent, and after this episode, that version of Crockett will never be seen again. In his hideout, Hackman boogies around to Hoagie Carmichael's Lazy Bones and chats with his unnamed wife, who is played by Julie Brahms. His wife is concerned about Hackman operating in Miami again because Crockett might go after him, but Hackman assures her that Crockett works in Vice, not robbery or homicide, and thus their paths are unlikely to cross. Tubbs and Switek visit their informant Izzy, who is now running a very sketchy jewelry store. Izzy admits that one of Hackman's known associates, a lowlife named Johnny Blatt, tried to fence some stolen jewelry through him. Blatt, who is played by Critters star Don Keith Opper, badly abuses his girlfriend Julia, played by Mary Finaro. When Crockett and Tubbs stop by her house looking for Blatt, a battered and bruised Julia points them in the direction of Hackman's hideout. Crockett and Tubbs raid the hideout, and a shootout ensues. Hackman and Blatt get away, but Hackman's wife is caught in the crossfire and later dies of her injuries in the hospital. Devastated by this, a burned-out Crockett tells Castillo he'd like to transfer to another department. Castillo agrees to put through the paperwork, though he mentions that Hackman's wife was actually shot by Hackman, not by Crockett. Izzy tells Switek and Trudy that Hackman and his crew are pulling another big job that night. Tubbs goes to ask Julia for more information and finds that she's been badly beaten again by Blatt. Julia tells Tubbs that Hackman is planning something at Caitlin's concert. Panicked, Tubbs tries to get in touch with Crockett, to no avail. Crockett visits Caitlin backstage at her concert, and then Caitlin takes the stage. After singing a very peppy song called Don't Turn Back, she launches into an interminable dirge titled Follow My Rainbow. I like Sheena Easton. I think both Strut and 9 to 5 Morning Train are downright catchy songs, but Follow My Rainbow is the worst song we will ever hear on Miami Vice, and we hear the whole thing from start to finish. Follow My Rainbow has an impeccable pedigree. It was written and produced by Babyface, but I hate it with the passion of 1,000 fiery suns. Bear in mind, however, that just 2 episodes back I professed my fierce love of Frank Stallone's Far From Over, so my taste in music is maybe not always to be trusted. Hackman poses as an electrician and sneaks into the lighting booth. After briefly fixing his sights on Crockett, he shoots and kills Caitlin as she heads off stage. Tubbs visits Crockett on his boat. Crockett is drunk and numb with grief, and Tubbs is forced to break the news that the medical examiner determined that Caitlin was 7 weeks pregnant. At Vice headquarters, the detectives, minus Crockett, discuss the state of the investigation. Hackman has been globe-trotting around the world, keeping ahead of the authorities, but Blatt, who has been in Chicago, recently called Julia to say he's going to return to Miami. Crockett, dressed in spectral head-to-toe white, unexpectedly pops up at the briefing and claims to be ready to return to work. He's going through the motions of his usual good humor and snappy banter, but there's definitely something off with him. Castillo gives him back his transfer paperwork, which he never submitted, and Crockett and Tubbs head to Julia's house. When Blatt arrives, they arrest him. From Blatt, they learn that Hackman is holed up in Caicos, and it's unlikely he'll be extradited. In Caicos, Hackman's bucolic new lifestyle is interrupted by Crockett, who shows up dressed in black and looking like death. Hackman taunts him, pointing out that Crockett can't legally touch him, and Crockett silently shoots and kills him before walking off. As Crockett leaves, we see that Hackman had a gun in his hand, which means Crockett was probably more or less within his legal rights to shoot him. The shot of Hackman's gun was added late in production at the request of NBC, which balked at the idea of Crockett shooting an unarmed man. It's a bit clumsy and inelegant because Hackman's gun seems to magically appear in the shot after Crockett shoots him, but NBC probably made the right call. Murdering Hackman while unarmed would probably take Crockett to a place that Miami Vice could never take him back from. Granted, over the next 3 episodes, we're going to see Crockett do worse things than murdering Hackman, and the series does eventually pull him back from the abyss. But in the universe of Miami Vice, which does not operate with the same rules as our own universe, whatever Crockett does in the season 4 finale and the first 2 episodes of season 5 is ultimately redeemable because it's not really Crockett doing it. I'm being a little cagey just on the off chance there's somebody watching these recaps who's never seen Miami Vice and thus doesn't know what happens to Crockett next episode. Unlikely, but it's possible. In any case, unless the long-term plan was to either have Crockett end up dead or in jail, softening the ending of this episode was probably necessary. I think this is a pretty great episode. For the most part, the script is fine, but not exceptional. It's hard to shake the suspicion that Caitlin's character was created for the sole purpose of later murdering her off so that Crockett could have motivation. And that's something we've seen so many times on so many TV shows and in so many films that it doesn't have the dramatic impact that the show wants it to have. It's not handled badly. It's just not that fresh. All that aside, however, 2 aspects of this episode elevate it into something extraordinary: the way it's filmed and Don Johnson's beautifully hollowed out, empty performance. Everything after Caitlin's death is very ominous. Just check out that dark sky above Crockett's boat. That's magnificent. It's as though Crockett has become some kind of wraith and he's carrying all the despair in the world with him. I'm giving this one 4 flamingos. Next time, Crockett goes through the looking glass and visits the dark side of his soul. And while he's there, he shags Julia Roberts. It's a magnificent way to end season 4, and I'm really looking forward to discussing it. So I will meet you back here then.